Welcome, explorers of the world's great mysteries. I'm Doug Kenyon, editor and publisher of Atlantis Rising magazine. We call this program simply Conversations. And here we feature the many great contributors to our publication, world-class researchers who dare to follow real evidence where it leads and let the chips fall where they may. In just a moment, I'll be talking to anthropologist and author Dr. Susan B. Martinez about global drying, her shocking cover story in the March-April 2014 Atlantis Rising. But first, for those of you unfamiliar with Atlantis Rising magazine, let me introduce you to our publication. Focusing on ancient mysteries, unexplained anomalies, future science, Atlantis Rising has for many years provided a serious forum for alternative ideas of prehistory, science, and culture. Ideas which, when not entirely ignored by the mainstream press, are yet seldom treated with the respect they deserve. Our magazine appears bi-monthly in printed form, and you can find it on stands in most major chain bookstores such as Barnes & Noble, Hastings, Books A Million, etc. It is also available from many New Age outlets and independent stores. If your favorite magazine dealer doesn't carry it, ask why. For iPad users, our free app can be found at the Apple App Store. Postal subscriptions are also available worldwide, and you can get it in PDF form or on an issue-by-issue basis directly from our website at atlantisrising.com. Among the many great articles in our March-April 2014 issue, you will find The Beasts of Beringia by William B. Stecker. Just how did Earth's many species get to where we find them today? Science has some serious explaining to do. And in The Man Who Could Not Be King, Stephen Sora chronicles the many secrets of Francis Bacon. And in Pythagoras and the Beanstalks, John Chambers explores what could have inspired a curious ancient proscription against eating beans, a belief which led to tragic results. You will also find a very exciting cover story by our current guest, maverick scientist Dr. Susan Martinez. It's called Global Drying, and maybe it's not warming that should most alarm us. Susan B. Martinez, PhD, earned her doctorate in anthropology from Columbia University, where she also served as a lecturer in ethnolinguistics. She's author of many books, including The Psychic Life of Abraham Lincoln, and most recently, The Mysterious Origins of Hybrid Man. That's from Inner Traditions, 2012. She's also produced numerous articles for Atlantis Rising. In the March-April issue, she's written the cover story. It's called Global Drying, and it lays out an alarming picture of Earth's climate and geopolitical prospects. Welcome, Dr. Martinez, to Atlantis Rising Conversations.
Hi, Doug, and thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome. And now, in Global Drying, your Atlantis Rising piece, you say, quote, although the developing world, China, India, Africa, etc., and I'm quoting here, definitely has its share of water problems, it might come as a surprise that the country with the highest proportion of drylands subject to desertification, in other words, becoming desert, is North America, with 74% affected, and you cite UNESCO. With California now facing a drought of historic proportions, what do you think now of the familiar global warming hypothesis?
Oh, well, I think I think, they kind of changed the name global warming to climate change.
Yeah, I noticed
They're
that.
starting to back off because it's not a valid fact as far as I'm concerned. That's something I've been tracking for 8 or 10 years now, and I've written about it in a couple of my books. I've got a book coming out next spring, not this spring, but next spring, with the tentative title Out of the Box. And I finally got to devote an entire chapter to that subject of global warming or correctly, global cooling, and that's chapter 4 in that book.
Now, well, just let me drill down here a little bit. For you, drying and cooling are directly associated, and what do you mean there?
I think that it's almost an obvious fact, but the standard model in science is dishing out something different to us. For example, I always like to use the example of Mars because we have an exemplary case of a planet which is considered our sister or brother planet in the solar system, which was once wet and warm and is now cold and dry. I don't think that's accidental. I think that's the standard pattern in planetary life.
So you think what's happening here is an inevitable result of the aging process?
Oh, absolutely.
So if in that kind of scenario, where is the anthropomorphic effect?
What exactly do you mean?
Well, I mean the idea that
anthropogenic.
Anthropogenic.
Oh, I know what you
I
mean.
apologize. Yeah.
Man-caused. Well, it's kind of ironic because in my research, I really haven't found any man-caused global warming except for the buildup of cities where pavement and steel and all of that does tend to collect heat, but that's to a minor degree. However, with the question of drought, I have found several instances of anthropogenic drought, which would be man-caused drought. Even I was just looking over an article which says that pollutants have been drying out the high mountain regions. It's a sort of a complicated argument, but it's written in a standard scientific journal. So anthropogenic global warming, no, I don't believe that's the case.
Well, what role do you think the sun plays in sunspots in particular in the cycles of climate on planet Earth?
That's a loaded question, and my mind is going off in about 3 or 4 different directions when you say that, because I'm working with a new science model that sees the heat and the moisture of our planet coming basically from the ionosphere of the Earth, from the magnetic field. So the sun is slightly irrelevant. It's not completely irrelevant, but let's see. There were 2 parts to your question. How far did I get?
Well, I'm just trying to learn what kind of a connection you make between the sunspots and current climate conditions. And I'm thinking, of course, of the Maunder minimum, where there was a correlation between low sunspot activity and a lot of cooling that led to a mini ice age.
Yeah. Let me start with the sunspot cycle, and I've written about this also, and in my opinion, the sunspots are just a symptom of what's going on. I believe that the actual source of changes of those fluctuations in the sunspot maxima and minima have to do with the change of the shape of the Earth's vortex, which is about the same as what I was talking about a minute ago, the magnetic field concentrated in the, in the ionosphere. I think that's the power station for the Earth where we get our heat and moisture and electricity. The pattern that I'm looking at is the change of shape. It's a cyclic thing. It's a regular thing. The vortex, if I may be permitted to use that term, goes through a cycle of rounding and flattening. This is the model I'm following. When it's rounded, which ESA, European Space Agency, calls compressed, it's the same thing. Rounded, compressed, also the term deformed has been used to explain it. That when it rounds, when it compresses, it's at its maximum, and that's when the Earth receives more heat, more rainfall, more storms, and so forth. In the flattening, that's the low point of the sunspot cycle, and that's when it's colder and drier.
But you see the sunspots as a cause of this, or they're both different aspects of the same phenomenon?
Yes, aspects of the same phenomena. I don't think there are spots on the sun. My own view, which is only partly worked out, is that because of the cyclic motion of planetary bodies, that certain dark planets, dead planets, cycle around every 11 years and create the illusion of spots on the sun. I think it's much closer to Earth that this phenomena is taking place.
So you're of the mind that what we think we're seeing through telescopes happening on the surface of the sun is really something else than what it appears to be.
I believe so.
What is it?
Dead planets.
Now, you think that these are planets that, well, can you explain a little bit more? That's I've never heard that idea before.
It could be in the photosphere of the sun that they're a dead planet. When I say dead planet, I'm talking about a world that we cannot see because it no longer radiates light, but it's still out there cycling around, and that it creates the appearance of spots on the sun from our vantage point, but is in fact within our own system.
So what do you think is the potential for a new ice age, like in the Maunder Minimum, through the fact that we're not seeing sunspots as we are? I mean, there's a decline in sunspot activity was associated with the cooling in the Maunder Minimum, right?
Yes. I think that there's another concept that I work with, and these are all pretty unfamiliar to today's science, but I've been working with this concept for a while. The Earth is constantly, I mean, the solar system really is constantly traveling through interstellar space. It's constantly on the move. This is an aspect of cosmology that you don't hear too much about. What kind of regions our system is moving through. The science that I'm referring to says that different parts of outer space have some are light regions and some are dark regions. Some have greater density and some have lighter density. There are quite a few variables. My idea is that when our system moves through a dark region, and there are some ancient names for them. The word Aji, which is spelled A-J-I, refers to dense and dark regions of space. I think that the solar system was in an Aegean region during the Maunder Minimum, and that anything else that has been called an ice age has been subject to perhaps the same phenomena. So predicting a future ice age would depend upon two things. It would depend upon being able to predict the regions of space our system is moving through, and I think that can be done. And it would also depend on an understanding of global cooling.
Let me just insert a little parenthetical here, which for people who don't necessarily know what we're referring to when we mention the Maunder minimum. I did mention it in passing, but a period in when was it, the 1700s, or that actually lasted almost 100 years, right, where temperatures got so low on the planet that actually it's associated, correct me if I'm wrong on the dates in this, it's the Black Plague, for example, is associated with it, and ice in the Thames in London,
yeah,
and bad crops.
Isn't that what's better known as the Little Ice Age?
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to, right?
Right, and I think in most books they give it a 300 or 400 year history, but the date that you mentioned was the peak of it, and then some scientists think that it ended when the Industrial Revolution began, and that's going back to the idea of anthropogenic heat.
Warming the planet.
Pardon?
Warming the planet, albeit benignly at first.
Yeah, in that case it would be if it were a fact, but I don't think it is. And Doug, you brought in the plague. This is the other thing about regions of Aji, which is a greater density and darkness in outer space that our system passes through. Aji also carries denser materials and plague materials. I'm not the only one saying this. I think I recall that Fred Hoyle had a similar idea, and other scientists have had this idea that plague spores, come to us from regions of space.
Well, I have the advantage of knowing that you did an article for us a few years ago dealing with what you were, the power of the night side, as you named it. And I'm just wondering how closely that's connected with what you're talking about now. I should say that the idea of such a power has been referenced by a lot of occult and intuitive writing, such as in the 19th century writer Frederick S. Oliver in his classic Dweller on Two Planets, and then more recently Edgar Cayce with the and it was said that scientists of Atlantis knew how to harness such a force. So my question is, do you see that as in any way connected to what you're talking about now? I realize you're going someplace else for your sources here, and you're welcome to speak freely about that. I don't want to to limit you in that regard. Anyway, do you think we're missing something here that would be a key, perhaps, to helping us solve some of our problems, or that's a force that could be harnessed, or is it just an abstraction? Number one is, was I correct in assuming there was a connection here? And if I'm not, that's okay too.
Doug, I'm sure there's a connection, and it's probably going to hit me an hour after we get off the phone, because all the science is of one piece. It's a single system, and it's got a gorgeous consistency to it. The night side of power has to do. Let me just talk about this for a minute or two, and
sure.
We'll see if it ties in or not. Again, I'm looking at the Earth's vortex as the power station, delivering magnetism, heat, light, moisture, electricity, and everything else to the planet. And it does that. To put it in a nutshell, it does that diurnally. We receive that energy during the day. You know, there's
Mm-hmm.
when the light is, uh, and uh, and it travels to the very center of the Earth, and then it comes out the Earth through the poles. I think primarily through the North Pole. Um, the power that comes to the Earth in the day is called vortexia, and the power that exits the Earth in the nighttime is called M vortexia. M with an apostrophe is a very ancient way of expressing the negative of a thing or the opposite of a thing, like Adam and Madam. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, so that's the basic model. It's very simple.
Benign
And
and malign.
okay, there you go. There's probably a lot of that.
Yeah.
So vortexia and vortexia, and along with this, I haven't figured this out. I have studied this from some sources. Uh, the vortexia, you see, this is where it turns the standard model 180 degrees around. The vortexia, coming out of the Earth at night, is not only the aurora borealis rather than coming from the solar wind, it is also in the model that I'm working on a major factor in earthquakes.
Hmm.
And the strongest uh, parameter that I have to back that up is the timing of earthquakes. And I've been trying to collect info on this, but most earthquakes occur at midnight, and then the range of time is usually till about 8:30 or 9 in the morning, and then they quit. Um, just anybody who's listening, look at the time. Look at the time in the next earthquake. It'll probably be early morning.
I.
That's that same vortexia power coming out of the earth, shaking
Hmm.
things up.
Hmm. Well, I've certainly never heard that before. I,
Well, I want to tell you more about it, Doug.
okay, go ahead.
I mean, not right now. I want to,
Well,
I want to write about it.
well, okay. Your request is noted. We'll see how much space we can make available there. Uh,
I will mention that the Japanese scientists know about this. They have been studying the ionosphere in connection with the earthquake prediction. And I know, I indirectly know one Japanese scientist, Masaki Kimura,
hmm.
who wrote up the wonderful Yonaguni finds.
Yeah, I know who he is, right?
He's a friend of a friend, but he don't speak English.
Hmm,
I was
that's right.
gonna email him, but and I don't speak Japanese.
Well, east is east and west is west, as they say.
But the man is a oceanic seismologist, so he would be the one to connect to find out how much the Japanese have accomplished on this account. You know, when I read through the literature, I discovered that 40, 50 years ago they were saying this. You know, it's it's not new. Each and every one of these so-called new ideas have been hanging around for 100 years or more.
Or more, exactly. Do you see a connection with, say, the ether or the 0 point field or any of those concepts here?
Well, absolutely, um, because in my thinking, there are two uh, principles, two things. There is a substance, corpore, matter, call it what you will, and ether.
Hmm.
Those are the two things in the universe. Ether is invisible to us, but it is also a power.
Hmm.
I have a website that goes a, a lot into ether, and it's called EarthVortex.com. You know, as much research as possible, as much confirmable fact as possible. Actually, what I'm doing in this writing is juxtaposing the lost continent in the Pacific as against the alleged continent in the Atlantic.
What do you say about people like, say, Ignatius Donnelly and his?
Well, he was such a fine fellow, and he really was a good man, and he was a wonderful researcher and a terrific writer. But I, I think I think that whenever there's a big question mark in ancient history, it's thrown to Atlantis. But for example, I just found a reference to Crete, and all these writings, all these writers are saying, well, Crete, you know, Egypt and Crete got their culture from Atlantis, but now I'm studying the language links because I have a background in linguistics. So I'm studying the language links, and Crete connects with the agglutinative languages. That is the word to describe languages that create long words, and they are characteristic of Chinese, Japanese, and American Indian languages. So what I'm doing in this research is tracing the I'm really using linguistics more than archaeology or channeling or anything else to trace these histories, so that Crete, I believe that Crete was settled from Turkey, which is not far, and the Turkish settlement came from Central Asia, and we're right back to global drying because this is fitting in now. I'm finding out how the Gobi dried out. Those people moved on to the Turkish lands, Asia Minor, as they called it. Then Asia Minor itself dried out.
Well, this actually enables me to ask you another. What do you make of something, say, like Göbekli Tepe?
Well, that's just exactly what I was thinking of, because that's a connection point. I was looking at it, and with my linguistic mind, I was looking at Gob-E and Gob-Ek-E. They are so alike. I mean, four letters out of 5 or 6 letters.
Well, I'm thinking about the dates because, of course, Göbekli Tepe totally turns up. I should clarify for people who are not the recent discovery in Turkey of a fully formed series of monuments, I guess you would call them, or communities that date. I mean, they're highly evolved and highly developed, beautifully carved, and date to approximately 10,000 BC. Well before the time when supposedly we got beyond the so-called hunter-gatherer stage, and of course this contradicts most of the mainstream concept of history.
And Doug, it's the tip of the iceberg. And it's very recent, as you say. I think Göbekli was uncovered around 1998. So this is all very new, and this is what the alternative writers are calling the paradigm smashing archaeology of Göbekli Tepe, and so that we're going to find, the next thing we're going to find out is where they came from. And I think they came from Gobi. I'm sure they came from Central Asia. And that civilization would have to be dated 20,000 BC.
You mean the Gobi Desert you're talking about? Or the...
Right.
Well, there's certainly a lot of possible interpretations on this. I know Robert Schoch, who um, uh, redated the Sphinx, basically demonstrating that it was built thousands of years before mainstream archaeology says. Um, he takes a lot of validation from Göbekli Tepe in the sense that it showed that there were indeed civilizations at that time operating and capable of doing monumental construction. What evidence do you, well, you've already covered this slightly, but among the fields of, say, or the schools of thought, Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, creationism, intelligent design, what school of thought uh, has influenced you the most or influenced your views? What do you identify with?
I'm a creationist,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm also uh, deeply involved in the study of early man, which I consider history, not really science. I really think it's been misidentified as that evolution and Darwinism has been misidentified as a science. Sure, you use in your apparatus and your methods are scientific, but the thing itself is the history of man, the earliest possible history of man. So I'm a historian to that extent, and I'm also a creationist because I'm also a spiritualist. I completely, wholeheartedly believe in the Creator and in the spirit world.
Well, let me, your recent book, The Mysterious Origins of Hybrid Man, let's talk about that a little bit and
Sure.
what your point is there.
Okay, it's really very simple, Doug. Um, I don't think we need evolution anymore. I don't think we need the 19th century obsolete theory of that Darwin produced, because so much work has been done since Darwin's time, and I am talking about paleontology, um, to fill out the fossil record and to demonstrate quite plainly that all these different races are not the result of evolution, but the result of interbreeding.
Mm-hmm.
When you interbreed, you get all kinds of combinations, and that's exactly what we have in the fossil record. So I spent 2 years researching and writing that book. That's twice as long as I ordinarily spend on a book. I mean, really twice as much. And when I say 2 years, I work full time.
So you feel that you can explain most of the fossil record, at least for humans and human ancestor or human not ancestors, but human type creatures as a function of interbreeding and hybridization.
Absolutely. It's so simple. It's so simple. There's nothing complicated about it. You take a Neanderthal and you cross it with a Cro-Magnon, and you get mixed features, and that's that's what you see at all of the Neanderthal sites in Israel, in Czechoslovakia, in Romania, in the Middle East, and even in Europe, the mixing of the two. And I do have some histories from Oaspe that really break down uh, what that crossbreeding was like. Those races were forbidden to mix, but
Mm-hmm.
they didn't follow the rules. Even the sacred race of little people broke the rules.
Kind of like
Everybody broke the rules, and the human race is a complete mix.
kind of like Romeo and Juliet, huh?
You got it.
The love is the love is a powerful force. And let me thank you for joining us. I was going to ask you, can you hear me? Can you hear me at all well
Yes,
enough?
it's better. It's better now.
I'm
I'm
just
hearing
talking.
you better.
I'm talking louder. uh, But I did want to ask you a couple things about your Lincoln book, and obviously you feel that he was guided from other dimensions, and if you could talk a little about the evidence that you found on that score.
Um, the- I think this part of the Lincoln story has been systematically suppressed, and all I had to do was hit the literature to find little bits and pieces of it and put them together and get a better picture of what was going on. It was not just Abraham, it was Mary also. They were both caught up in the great age of spiritualism, which kicked
Mm-hmm.
in 1848. That's when they were in Springfield, and he was just on the rise. But by 1850, they lost little Eddie. They lost their 4-year-old son. And by that time, the Hydesville and Rochester mediums were already out west. The timing was remarkable. By 1850, they were already in Illinois. So Abraham and Mary, with the death of little Eddie, consulted 3 mediums in Illinois, and it was in the air. It's really hard for us to imagine what it was like, but it was a grassroots thing, and it was a burning high all over the place. And then it crossed the Atlantic to England in the 1860s, when the Civil War hit here and got even bigger over there.
Hmm. And do you think any of his policies as president were influenced by these spiritual forces?
That was the great struggle within Lincoln. He didn't. He was a kind of. He played the skeptic a lot, but he lost another son in the White House. That was Willie. He was 11. That was in 1862, right in the middle of the war. He lost another son. And let me tell you, they went right back to the mediums because D.C. at that time was the epicenter of the thing, and they had the Lorries, who were really well known. Even in today's literature, we know about the Lorries in Georgetown. They regularly attended seances and so forth over there after Willie's death. Willie's death really devastated the two of them. Willie was a charmer. He was a little prince. He was so bright. He got Potomac fever or whatever it was, during wars, how germs go.
So I guess
that was Lincoln's turning point, the death of Willie in 1862.
But you think he kept it personal, or that it actually invaded his policy ideas?
Well, let me tell you what happened. He started. He had. His main. He was quite psychic himself. Children who've been traumatized tend to become psychic adults. There's a lot to talk about on that score. Both Lincoln and Mary lost their mother before the age of 10. There was a kind of broken psyche there, and broken psyches are suction for spirit.
Mm-hmm. Certainly some influences.
Okay, now I remembered. Lincoln had a lot of phenomena associated with him, foreknowledge, but the main way in which his psychism was expressed was in his dream life. And he did have prophetic dreams. I document them in the book. But now getting into politics, the most outstanding dream that he had, a lot of his dreams are recorded in the Lincoln biographies. There are 6,000 and counting of them. Yeah, so they're there in the literature. the one dream that is not in the literature is in Oaspe. In the one of the final books, like I say, it's chronological. It has Oaspe has about a 2-page coverage of Lincoln, and the dream that's revealed in this case is where the angels came to him in the dream and bottom line told him to free the slaves. Okay. So Lincoln woke up and thought it was just his imagination, but they said, the angel said, you wake up and think you just imagine this, but we'll come to you again. And they did. There was a second dream with the same command. And so Lincoln contemplated it, and he secretly wrote up the Emancipation Proclamation and kept it in his vest, and little by little presented it to his cabinet. He also was under the influence of Nettie Maynard. Is name familiar?
Vaguely.
Yeah, the standard books know about her, but they tend to dump on her. But she had a terrific influence on the Lincolns. She was secretly escorted in and out of the White House during his entire administration. She had come from Connecticut because her brother was wounded in Virginia. And the Lauries grabbed her because, like I say, there was a lot of action with sittings.
Well, hopefully, if people want to learn more about this, they can get your book, which is available.
Right.
And
right.
So I think we're going to have to conclude it there. But thank you very much, Susan Martinez, for talking to us on Atlantis Rising Conversations, and we'll be talking to you more down the road.
Just great meeting you, Doug.
Okay, thanks, Susan. For more on this, check our website at atlantisrising.com. This is Doug Kenyon for Atlantis Rising Conversations.